How did nobody die in this series? No, seriously, every episode, someone was getting punched, kicked, thrown across a hallway, chased through a school, or starting another gang war, and somehow they all showed up to class the next morning like nothing happened. At one point, I stopped worrying about the story and started wondering if these students were secretly superheroes. But as ridiculous as some of the violence was, that's not what stayed with me. What stayed with me was something much simpler: friendship. And honestly, High School Frenemy became one of my favorite dramas of the year because of it. When I first started watching High School Frenemy, I thought I knew exactly what I was getting. 2 rival schools, 2 former best friends, a lot of fights, a lot of anger, a lot of misunderstandings. Simple, or at least that's what I thought. But somewhere along the way, this series became much more than that. Behind all the punches and shouting, there was a surprisingly emotional story about forgiveness, growing up, and learning how to let people back into your life. Shin and Saint. The heart of this story is Shin and Saint. And honestly, I don't think the word friend means the same thing in their dictionary as it does in ours, because these two spent 16 episodes saying some of the most emotionally devastating things imaginable and then casually calling each other friends. Saint leaves. Shin feels abandoned. Years pass. Neither of them can move on. And when they finally meet again, every conversation feels like 2 people carrying years of unresolved pain. The thing I loved most wasn't their conflict, it was what existed underneath it. Because no matter how angry Shin became, there was always sadness hiding behind that anger, and no matter how much Saint tried to act strong, you could tell he regretted what happened every single day. That's what made their relationship so compelling. Not the fighting, not the drama, the fact that they still cared. And can we talk about how long this show made us wait to learn what actually happened? For episode after episode, Shin kept saying, "You ruined my life. I'll never forgive you. You destroyed my dream." And I was sitting there like, okay, but what did he do? This drama stretched that mystery so far that by the time the truth finally arrived, I almost wanted to stand up and applaud. And honestly, when we finally learned what happened, I understood Shin completely. His anger made sense. His pain made sense. Everything suddenly clicked. Now, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe the giant flashing neon sign in the room, because this series is technically a bromance, but every single episode had me questioning that label. The way they look at each other, the way they talk to each other, the way they constantly choose each other. At some point, I wasn't even watching a school drama anymore. I was watching 2 people emotionally orbit around each other for 16 episodes, and then the finale happened. The rain scene, the confession, the umbrella, the eye contact, the "I love you," and I was ready. I thought, okay, this is it. Only for the drama to look me directly in the face and say, nope, still bromance. At that point, I just laughed. Because whether you call it friendship, bromance, soulmate connection, or whatever else, the emotional bond between Shin and Saint is the strongest relationship in the entire series. But surprisingly, the thing I loved most wasn't even Shin and Saint. It was the friendship. Because underneath all the fighting, these kids were lonely, they were angry, they were hurt, and most of them didn't know how to ask for help. Watching them slowly become a family was probably my favorite part of the entire show. The classroom scenes, the shared meals, the moments where they stopped seeing each other as enemies, those moments hit harder than any fight scene. Because that's where the real story was, not about winning, not about revenge, but about belonging. And I have to mention Mark's performance as Chat Jen. Everyone in this cast did an incredible job. Sky and Nani carried the emotional weight of the story beautifully, but Mark completely surprised me. He made Chat Jen feel real, funny when he needed to be, heartbreaking when he needed to be, and every time he appeared on screen, I paid attention. He was one of the biggest highlights of the series for me. One thing I appreciated was that this story wasn't only about students, it was also about adults trying and sometimes failing to help them. Were some of the teacher storylines frustrating? Absolutely. There were moments where I wanted to shake everyone and say, please communicate like normal human beings. But at the same time, I appreciated that the drama showed how difficult it can be to guide teenagers who are carrying so much pain. Not every adult had the right answer, and honestly, that felt realistic. Of course, this series isn't perfect. Some conflicts repeated themselves too many times, some fight scenes stretched believability, and 16 episodes definitely felt longer than necessary. There were moments where I thought, guys, please stop fighting for 5 minutes. But somehow, despite all those flaws, I still cared, and I think that's because the emotional core of the story remained strong. Before I finish this review, I want to talk about the song that stayed with me the most, Promise, performed by Sky and Nani. Honestly, I don't think this song made me emotional because of Shin and Saint. I think it made me emotional because it made me think about myself. There's one line that really stayed with me. When the world feels cold and cruel, remember I'm always here for you. And when I heard that, I suddenly understood why their friendship touched me so deeply. Because everyone wants someone like that. Someone who stays, someone who understands, someone who doesn't leave when life becomes difficult, someone who keeps their promise. Watching Shin and Saint, I realized how much they relied on each other, even after years of anger, even after misunderstandings, even after hurting each other. Deep down, they were still the person the other needed most. To be honest, I found myself envying them a little. Not because I wanted their drama, definitely not their school fights. I like being alive, but because they had each other, no matter what happened. They always had someone to return to, and listening to Promise made me realize how rare that kind of friendship actually is. Sometimes I wonder if I even have someone like that in my life, or if I would know how to handle a friendship that deep if I did. Maybe that's why the song hit me so hard, because it wasn't just describing Shin and Saint, it was describing something many of us quietly wish for, a person who stays, a person who chooses us, again and again. When the series ended, I wasn't thinking about the fights, I wasn't thinking about the rival schools, I wasn't even thinking about the mystery anymore. I was thinking about Shin and Saint. I was thinking about the classroom. I was thinking about the people who chose to stay. And honestly, I think that's why this story stayed with me, because beneath all the chaos, High School Frenemy reminded me that sometimes the strongest relationships aren't built when everything is going well. They're built when people choose each other, even after everything falls apart.
กูจะไม่มีวันทิ้งมึงไปไหนอีก
Exploring the stories that stay with us, one scene at a time. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again in another scene and another soul.